They built a drag car so fast, the NHRA banned it before the race even started.
In 1970, the NHRA made a quiet but chilling announcement. We're drawing the line, no official ban, no dramatic headline, but behind closed doors, officials were panicking. Cars were getting too fast, too unpredictable, and one man, Don the Snake Prudhomme, had just unleashed a machine that scared even the rule makers. His weapon, a bright yellow Plymouth Barracuda, wearing a Hot Wheels logo, and powered by a fire-breathing Hemi. It didn't just win races, it obliterated them. Fans called it art, rivals called it unfair, and the NHRA, they called it a problem. This is the story of the car too fast for the NHRA. There was a time when drag racing felt more like a dare than a sport. The late 1960s were wild years, the kind of years when men strapped themselves into hand-built rockets and hoped they made it to the other end of the track in one piece. The National Hot Rod Association was growing fast, but the rules were still loose, and the danger was real. Every pass down the strip was a test of nerve, not just horsepower. Engines were loud enough to shake your chest. Flames cracked from open exhaust pipes. The air smelled like burning rubber and nitromethane. Fans in the bleachers loved every second of it, because they knew they were watching something raw, a fight between man, machine, and time itself. Nobody cared about wind tunnels or computers. Back then, the only data you needed was the sound of your motor and the feel of your right foot. It was also the birth of a new kind of monster, the funny car. These machines looked like production cars at first glance, but underneath those thin fiberglass bodies lived full-blown dragsters, supercharged engines, lightweight frames, and raw power beyond imagination. They were unpredictable, unstable, and often deadly. But that was part of their charm. Drivers called them beasts with minds of their own. The crowds could not get enough. Every Sunday, thousands came to watch these drivers risk everything for glory. Exploding engines, fireballs, and near misses were not accidents. They were part of the show. If a car went straight, it was a miracle. If it caught fire, it was a memory. That was the reality of the golden era. Fast, fearless, and on the edge of disaster. But in the middle of all that chaos, there were a few racers who did not just chase speed, they controlled it. Men who understood that drag racing was more than power. It was precision, timing, and patience. And among them was one man who stood out, a quiet, sharp-eyed Californian nicknamed the Snake. Don Prudhomme did not roar for attention. He just showed up, tuned his car, and won. Race after race, he built a reputation for being calm, focused, and frighteningly consistent. By the end of the 1960s, he was already a rising legend. But the car that would define him was still being dreamed up. A car so fast and so flawless that it would shake the NHRA to its core. Because when the Hot Wheels Barracuda arrived in 1970, drag racing's Wild West would finally meet its sheriff. Before Don Prudhomme became a legend, he was just a quiet kid from California who loved the smell of fuel and the sound of engines. He wasn't the loudest man in the pits, but when he climbed behind the wheel, everyone paid attention. He had something most racers didn't, a calmness that could cut through chaos. In the late 1950s, drag racing was still finding its identity, and Prudhomme was one of the young guns helping shape it. He started with simple gas dragsters, tuning them himself, running on pure instinct. He didn't have big money or sponsors back then, just a garage full of tools, a few friends, and a dream to go faster than anyone else. Other racers called him the Snake because of how smooth and deadly his reaction times were. While others burned rubber too early or lost traction, Prudhomme moved with precision, silent, quick, and accurate. Once the light turned green, he was gone. That nickname stuck with him forever. By the mid-1960s, he had built a reputation that made even seasoned racers nervous. He wasn't a showman, he was a surgeon behind the wheel. When Prudhomme lined up, you didn't look at the other lane, you watched him. Every movement, every sound from his engine carried the promise of something extraordinary. Then came one of the most famous partnerships in drag racing history. Don the Snake Prudhomme and Tom the Mongoose McEwen. Their rivalry was pure entertainment, but behind the scenes it was also friendship and respect. They raced hard against each other, but together they changed the entire image of drag racing. In 1970, something unheard of happened. Mattel, the toy company behind Hot Wheels, decided to sponsor both of them. It was the first time a major brand had ever entered professional drag racing. Suddenly, dragsters were not just race cars, They were superstars. Kids everywhere wanted to see them. The sport that once lived in smoke and grease was now on toy shelves across America. Prudhomme's new weapon for this partnership was the Plymouth Barracuda funny car, a bright yellow missile designed to destroy records and win hearts. Under its lightweight fiberglass body sat a fire-breathing 426 cubic inch Hemi engine, supercharged and ready to explode down the strip. It was more than just fast. It was art, wrapped in danger. Don didn't want fame or lights, he wanted victory. And when he tested that Barracuda for the first time, even he knew this car was something else. It gripped harder, launched straighter, and pulled faster than anything he had ever touched. The team around him called it the perfect machine. But the truth was, the world wasn't ready for it. Because the Hot Wheels Barracuda wasn't just built to win races, it was built to scare the competition, and maybe even the rule makers. The year was 1970. The drag strip had become America's new kind of battlefield, loud, smoky, and ruled by fearless men chasing fractions of a second. In this war for speed, Don the Snake Bot Prudhomme was preparing to unleash a weapon unlike anything the National Hot Rod Association had ever seen, the Hot Wheels Plymouth Barracuda funny car. Now this wasn't an ordinary Barracuda. It shared almost nothing with the car you could buy from a dealership. The body was a thin shell of fiberglass, stretched and shaped to cut through air like a bullet. Underneath, it sat on a custom-built chrome moly tube chassis. Light as aluminum but strong enough to survive explosions that could shake the ground. At its heart was a 426 cubic inch Hemi engine, supercharged and fed by nitromethane fuel. This wasn't the kind of fuel you'd find at a gas station. Nitromethane burns with a fire so fierce it can melt pistons, and its smell alone could make your eyes water. When that engine came alive, it didn't just roar, it thundered. Every run felt like a controlled detonation. The mechanics who worked on that car weren't just crew members. They were scientists of chaos, men who tuned by ear and touch, measuring power by instinct rather than instruments. Every bolt, every spark plug, every fuel mixture was hand-checked by Prudhomme himself. He was known for his precision. If a line wasn't perfect, the run didn't happen. When the Barracuda rolled onto the strip, fans went silent. Its paint glowed in the sun, yellow and blue with the Hot Wheels logo flashing across the side. To kids, it was the coolest car they'd ever seen. To other racers, it looked like trouble, and to the NHRA officials, it looked too perfect. You see, funny cars in those days were still unpredictable beasts. Many exploded, caught fire, or lost control halfway down the track. But the Hot Wheels Barracuda was different. It hooked perfectly, it stayed straight, it finished runs faster than what seemed humanly possible. In testing, it was rumored to hit speeds that made even veteran racers take a step back. Every part of that machine was designed for one thing: domination. It launched off the line with so much force that Prudhomme once said it felt like getting punched in the chest by a truck. From start to finish, it demanded complete control because if he blinked for even a moment, it could turn from legend to disaster. And that was the fine line they walked between genius and madness. The Barracuda was so quick, so consistent, that whispers started spreading through the pits. That thing's too fast, some said. It's not natural. Others claimed it gave Prudhomme an unfair advantage, that no one could keep up. The NHRA began to take notice. But to Don, it wasn't about breaking rules, it was about breaking limits. He didn't build the Barracuda to please anyone. He built it to show what a human and a machine could do when pushed to the edge. The crowds loved it. The kids idolized it. And the NHRA? They started to worry that one man with one car had just gone faster than their rulebook could handle. By 1971, Don the Snake Prudhomme's Hot Wheels Barracuda had become a monster that couldn't be ignored. Every time he lined up on the strip, something wild happened. The fans loved it. The noise, the flames, the lightning-fast launches. But behind those cheers, NHRA officials were starting to worry, because this car was doing things no funny car had ever done before. Most funny cars of the era were unpredictable. They would slide, shake, or even flip when pushed too hard. But not Prudhomme's Barracuda. It launched clean, ran straight, and stopped without drama. It was like watching chaos turned into order, and that scared people. The NHRA had built its rulebook around limits, but Don's car was rewriting them every weekend. At the time, the NHRA didn't use modern safety tech or computer sensors. Everything depended on human judgment and trackside observation. When Prudhomme's Barracuda blasted down the quarter-mile faster than expected, it wasn't just impressive, it was alarming. Some runs were clocked at speeds close to 240 miles per hour. a figure that was nearly unbelievable for a funny car in the early 1970s. Rumors started spreading through the pits that Barracuda's too quick, they'll have to ban it, it's not even fair anymore. Prudhomme brushed it off. To him it was simple, build a better machine and drive it better than anyone else. He wasn't cheating, he was just ahead of his time. But the NHRA had a problem. Cars like Prudhomme's were not just fast, they were dangerous fast. The speeds were growing quicker than the safety rules could evolve. The tracks weren't built for such violence. Engines were exploding, tires were shredding, and crashes were getting deadlier every season. Something had to change, and the Barracuda became the symbol of that change. Officials began tightening regulations. They introduced stricter limits on fuel mixtures, engine displacement, and body construction. The goal was to slow the cars down, to keep the sport from turning into a firestorm. And although they never officially banned Don Prudhomme's Barracuda by name, everyone in the racing world knew the new rules were written because of it. That car forced the NHRA to evolve. It pushed them to redesign their rulebook, to make the sport safer and more controlled. But in doing so, they also dimmed a small piece of what made drag racing so wild in the first place. Because the Barracuda wasn't built to obey, it was built to show what too fast really meant. Even Prudhomme admitted later that the car scared him sometimes. He once said, "It was like holding a tiger by the tail. You respect it, or it'll bite you." Every run was a gamble, a dance between courage and disaster. And when that kind of power meets human skill, it creates something unforgettable. In the end, the Hot Wheels Barracuda became more than a car, it became a warning. It showed how far man could go when driven by passion, and how the world often responds when something becomes too good for its own time. When the smoke finally cleared and the engines fell silent, one truth remained. Don the Snake Prudhomme had changed drag racing forever. His Hot Wheels Barracuda didn't just win races, it reshaped the entire culture of the sport. It proved that speed could be more than just numbers on a scoreboard, it could be a story of courage, innovation, and human willpower. After the Barracuda's era, the NHRA entered a new chapter. Safety rules became stricter. Cars were required to meet tighter standards for engines, body design, and fuel systems. Some said the sport lost a bit of its madness, that edge-of-your-seat danger that defined the early years. But others argued that Prudhomme's Barracuda forced the sport to grow up, to evolve from raw chaos into professional racing. And that's the thing about the Snake. He was never just a driver, he was a craftsman. He could feel when an engine wasn't right, or when a run was off by a fraction. He didn't rely on luck, he built his success on precision. Every spark plug, every fuel line, every shift timed like a heartbeat. His control behind the wheel made him seem almost machine-like, yet his humility kept him deeply human. Even as the years passed and newer funny cars took over the strip, the legend of the Hot Wheels Barracuda continued to grow. To fans who saw it in person, it was more than fiberglass and horsepower, it was a piece of living history. Kids who once played with Hot Wheels toys of the Barracuda grew up to become racers themselves, carrying forward that same spark of rebellion that Prudhomme had ignited. What made him so special wasn't just his wins, it was his attitude. He never bragged, never trash-talked, he let the car do the talking. And when it did, it spoke louder than anyone else in the lane. His rivalry with Tom the Mongoose McEwen became the face of American drag racing, bringing the sport into living rooms, magazines, and the hearts of millions. Today, that original Hot Wheels Barracuda funny car is remembered as a symbol of the golden age of speed, when racers built legends with wrenches, not computers. When each race wasn't just about trophies, but about who dared the most. The NHRA may have slowed things down for safety, but it never managed to tame that spirit. Every modern dragster that explodes off the line carries a small piece of the Snake inside it, that fearless drive to go just a little faster, no matter the risk. In the end, Don Prudhomme didn't just build a fast car, he built an era when rules were rewritten, heroes were made of fire and steel, and every race felt like the world might explode if you blinked. That's the legacy of the Snake, the man who built a car so fast, so fierce that even the NHRA had to stop and ask themselves, how much speed is too much? There was a time when speed had no boundaries, when men didn't chase records on screens, they chased them on asphalt, breathing fire and smoke. And standing right in the middle of that storm was Don the Snake Prudhomme, calm, fearless, and utterly obsessed with perfection. His Hot Wheels Barracuda wasn't just a car, it was a statement. It said, we can go faster, we can build better, we can dream bigger. It came from an era when risk wasn't avoided, it was respected. Every time Prudhomme fired up that Hemi engine, it was more than a race, it was art painted in smoke and sound. The early 1970s were the wild frontier of drag racing, a time before digital limits, before simulations, before the fear of too much. Racers built with their hands, trusted their instincts, and sometimes paid the price for pushing too far. But that's what made them legends. They weren't driven by sponsorships or fame, they were driven by passion, pure, unfiltered, gasoline-fueled passion. Don Prudhomme represented the best of that spirit. He didn't just drive fast, he lived fast, in the truest sense of the word. Every run was a test of courage, every victory was proof that skill, dedication, and a little bit of madness could take a man beyond what seemed possible. Today, when we look back at those old clips, the grainy film, the flames, the roar of the crowd, we're not just watching a car race, we're watching history being written by people who weren't afraid to risk everything for a few seconds of glory. And that's what the Hot Wheels Barracuda stands for, the moment when human courage met mechanical genius. Modern drag racing may be cleaner, safer, and smarter, but it will never be wilder than it was back then. Those early funny cars, those fearless drivers, they carried a kind of raw emotion that can't be recreated by technology. They built a legacy that still fuels dreams today. So the next time you hear the crackle of a nitro engine or smell that sweet burning fuel, remember this: once upon a time, a man named Don the Snake Prudhomme built a car so fast that even the NHRA had to step back and say, "That's enough." But for people like us, the ones who love history written in tire smoke, we know the truth. Speed never really had limits. It only had heroes brave enough to chase it. In the end, Don the Snake Prudhomme didn't just build a faster car, he built a legacy that forced the world to redefine what fast really meant. His Hot Wheels Barracuda wasn't created in a factory by engineers with computers, it was born out of sweat, sleepless nights, and pure obsession. It was the creation of a man who believed that perfection was always one more run away. The NHRA may have tried to slow things down, but they could never stop what that car started. The Barracuda lit a fire that still burns today, a fire for speed, for innovation, and for the fearless spirit of those who refuse to accept limits. It became the symbol of a time when racing wasn't about statistics, but about soul. When bravery mattered more than technology, and when victory was measured not in trophies, but in heartbeats. Even decades later, the echo of that Hemi engine still feels alive. Every nitro funny car that tears down the strip today carries a little piece of the snake in its heart, that hunger to go faster, to push harder, to chase the impossible. Because this was never just a story about horsepower or machinery. It was about humanity, about a man and his machine standing together on the edge of control and chaos. Don Prudhomme didn't chase fame, he chased perfection. And in doing so, he became immortal. Legends like him aren't born, they're built. Built in garages, on drag strips, and in the hearts of people who never stop chasing the next tenth of a second. If you close your eyes, you can almost hear it. The deep crackle of nitromethane, the roar of the crowd as the Christmas tree lights up, and that flash of yellow and blue shooting into history. That sound isn't just noise, it's the heartbeat of an era, when men raced not for money, but for glory. And maybe that's why the story of the snake still gives us chills, because deep down, we all admire the ones who never lift their foot off the throttle, the ones who'd rather risk everything than live halfway. That's the spirit of drag racing. That's the spirit of Don Prudhomme. If this story moved you, if the roar of the snake's Barracuda still echoes in your chest, don't let it fade away. Hit the like button to keep this story of raw American speed alive. Subscribe to Regal Rides for more true legends that shaped the golden age of car culture. And tell us in the comments, which outlaw machine should we uncover next? Because as long as there are people who love the sound of an engine and the thrill of rebellion, the fire of drag racing will never die.